Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next installment of Undertone Anywhere. This is Passion for Purpose. My name is Ben, and I am so excited to be moderating today's lovely panel. We're going to talk about a lot of things on this webinar, our passions, our purpose, how the two work together. But before I introduce the panel, let them introduce themselves, I just want to talk a little bit about passions and purpose, what we feel they mean, and how the two can work together. Because you might bring your purpose into your life through your passions, but they're not necessarily the same thing. Your purpose is a little bit deeper. It's the why you do what you do versus the what you do. If your purpose is to inspire people to eat healthy foods, depending on what your passions are, you could maybe become a nutritionist, write a cookbook, start a blog. Your passions are how you carry out that purpose. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about here today. We're going to talk a little bit about our backgrounds, how we got to where we are, and some hopefully takeaways for you guys and how you can bring that into your own lives if you don't already. So without further ado, I'll start by introducing myself. Again, my name is Ben. I am the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Undertone. I am also the owner and founder and head strength coach for Attain Wellness, which is a local personal training studio that I opened in my hometown. I am fortunate enough to work for a company that allows me to both at Undertone and at Attain pursue my purpose through my different passions because they run the gamut. But I'm going to start by now having ourselves introduce our panel. Just give yourself a little bit about what you do currently before we really get into the why. And let's start with Miriam, whom I know just recently celebrated a birthday, and I wasn't going to let you get away with not saying happy birthday to you on this call. So Miriam, introduce yourself for us.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, guys. My name is Miriam Attain. I am one of the co-founders of an organization called Second Day, and our mission is helping more young people, specifically college seniors, build social impact careers at nonprofits and social enterprises all over the country through our Impact Fellowship program. So just a little bit about me.
Awesome. And Susu, I think you are also, you are below me on this call. I'm trying to now situate where to look on these calls. But why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for everybody?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Susu Grace. I am the co-founder and director of experience partnerships at Givesley. Givesley is a social impact company. We work with businesses and nonprofits, and we believe that businesses have the resources to do good. They just need some guidance to show them the way. And so that's what we do at Givesley.
Awesome. Awesome. And now I know why we are all on this call together. We have been able to blend our passions and our purpose into one. But we are going to start today's call with a poll for everybody to ask a little bit of a question about how they're fulfilling their purpose. So you can see now on your screen, you should see a little poll. Where do you feel you fulfill your purpose? At work, outside of work, both, or neither? And you can go ahead and fill that out now. We can't vote on this poll, which is a bummer because I'd love to cast my vote there, even though I kind of gave my answer away. And we'll see the results here in just a second. That can help guide our conversation for today and hopefully help answer some questions later on. Awesome. So we've got 40% of us saying that we are fulfilling our purpose both at work and outside. Some people saying neither, and then a few more saying outside of work than at work. But that both is honestly a great way to segue into what my first question is for both of you, because we talked a little bit about what we do. Now really gets to the fun part about why we do what we do. And Susu, you can start. I'd like you to share your story, how you got to where you are today, what were some of the steps that you took to get there, and really what is your purpose and what lights your fire?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So, my background is hospitality. That's where I think my passion for events really started. And, quickly got into corporate events because hospitality is intense. And, in my first couple roles, I think I was feeling challenged, getting into events within, the corporate space. But I slowly felt that passion was falling away, and I was starting to feel a little bit unmotivated and sort of not understanding doing, what I was doing. And I think that's when I realized that my passion for events was slipping away and I needed to make a change. And so I know this is not something we can do right now, and we've had, this conversation, but I quit my job and I took some time to travel, and, that really gave me the space. It was 6 weeks in Australia, and started thinking about really what I wanted to do. And I think understanding that I could have a purpose for my passion. And when I came back, connected with now my co-founder and CEO, Chad Hickey, and really dove into a career where I, started feeling that what I loved about events, I can now actually do for good. And so, I've definitely found that, now I'm feeling fulfilled, and I'm feeling, like I have a path again. And it's something that combines my love and, I'm definitely wired to be in events and have that personality, but, I'm doing it in a way that gives back, and guiding other companies to give back as well. And I just think that, I have definitely found in my career now how to continue that passion, but do it in such a way that I love coming to work, every day.
That's awesome. That's great. I have 10 questions now to ask you about all of that. Most importantly, how was Australia? Because I've always wanted to go, but we'll get to that later. Thank you so much for sharing. Miriam, same to you.
Yeah. So this is particularly special to me. I was looking at the participant list and I recognize a lot of people. So it's really nice to see everybody, because my first job out of college was at Undertone, and I learned so much about sort of what I love and what gets me really excited. And I really enjoyed kind of taking ownership of projects. I was really lucky to have managers and be in an environment where I was kind of given the ability to run with things. And I learned that that's where I really thrived. And I was there for about 2.5 years. And I realized that I had kind of learned everything that I could learn in that role. And so I decided to similarly step away for a little while. I took a few months off, and in that time is actually when I started Second Day. And that was very much just by chance. I think that my now co-founder had reached out to me saying he had this idea he was rolling around in his head, and I was just really drawn to it. And I'll share more about sort of what drew me to that project. But, I think that the idea of helping young people kind of find their path, mentorship, of trying to fight larger kind of societal norms of what we deem success and what we consider to be acceptable career paths was something that really, really drove me. And this idea that if you want to have a mission-driven career, you deserve all of the resources and support in the world to make it happen, because it's really important, and everyone deserves to have a career that they're really fulfilled by. So that's really what initially drew me into this. I then worked at JP Chase, a very different kind of environment, for about a year, and similarly learned like, okay, this is not the place for me. I don't have the space to grow personally and professionally the way that I want to. I think there is room to grow, but I just don't have the personality to do it there. So I hit my 13-month mark, bounced, left New York, moved to Houston, and I've been running Second Day full-time ever since. So I think for me, the journey has been sort of really seemingly nonlinear, but I've picked up so many skills and like insights about myself along the way that I feel that it really brought me to the right place at the right time. So that's a little bit of my professional and personal journey with it.
That's awesome. It sounds like some trips have been the crux of some change for both of you, going to Houston, going to Australia. I guess it's time for us to safely take a trip all together. I just need to go and get out to one of these places. That's great. So Miriam, you hit on a little bit on, you felt like you were in a job where we were very fortunate to be coworkers and meet, but you felt like you learned everything that you had to learn, and then decided to make a change. And I think that is what a lot of people feel. And sometimes, depending on your role, that's the moment at which you know that you might need to make a change. Susu, I would bring that question back to you a little bit more. I'd love for you to elaborate potentially on some more things around, like, what other areas did you feel like you weren't getting in your old role that you maybe wanted to go find somewhere else, and what those events were that led you to make those decisions, other than your trip over to Australia as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of things that Miriam touched on, not feeling
Hmm.
challenged, not feeling growth. I also think I had reached a point where I specifically recall like my third CES in a row where it was another successful week. This is awesome. I'm traveling, I'm getting exposure to executives. And I, I mean, I honestly felt like a little empty after. Like it just felt like I'm putting all this time and energy and effort into something that I'm not feeling fulfilled after. And I think that was back in 2018. And I feel like that's when I sort of, put a stick in the ground and said, like, I'm going to work really hard this year so that at the end of the year I can go find that purpose, and figure out what that next step is for me. And I also identified that I really hadn't taken any risks, like my life had been sort
Mm.
of set up. I went to, a comfortable college, a drive away from where I grew up. I moved into the city, which was also, very close to where I grew up. And then I, went into an industry that I studied. Like everything just sort of felt in a, a little box. And I was starting to feel like if I didn't step outside, I wasn't ever going to continue to challenge myself or find that thing that would continue to drive my passion in a way that I would show up every day ready to give my all because I know I would get something back, and build something that aligned with my values. And so I think with all of
Yeah.
that said, it was sort of those feelings I kept feeling after putting so much time and effort in that I knew I had to take that time to figure out what it was. And so I would say that was really the push that it gave me to make a change.
Yeah. It sounds like you were thinking for a moment about what your future self would say to you, being, not taking a ton of risks and knowing that you might maybe not necessarily feel regret, but always think about that what if question,
Yeah.
that you kind of wanted to avoid. So in that same way, Miriam, if you thinking about where you are now could, after everything you've been through, and we're going to go into some of the ways that things aren't always so easy, potentially for a founder and for someone taking these risks, what you would tell your former self. And I think a lot of people can learn from people going through these things right now about trying to pursue their purpose and their passions, and giving a little comfort to those people or a little bit of advice of, what you wish you knew a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what I wish I had known is that all of the skills that I picked up over the past couple of years would be really valuable, and to really
Mm.
take the time that I had at Undertone, take the time I had at Chase, and really absorb that in full, because those were things that were going to translate. So I think, I have definitely drawn from those things, but I sometimes wonder, I was like, man, if I had paid even more attention, or if I had plugged into this stuff even more, what other skills could I have gained? So I think you're constantly building your career capital towards whatever it is that you care about. And so I think that that's something that I would remind myself. And I think the other one would be to take breaks, to give yourself the space to recuperate. Being an entrepreneur is really challenging, and you're always on, and you're always stressed, and you're always thinking about everything. So I think that's something that I'm always trying to remind myself now is to take step backs as much as possible, reflect on what you've done, celebrate your wins, and just know that things will happen in their own time and at their own pace.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of us are, and I speak for myself when I say, even when all these times now, the virtual world that we live in and the quarantined world that some of us still live in, it's hard to think that we should take time for ourselves because our computer is always there, work is always on, our emails are always popping up. But I feel like that's a really important point, especially when you are the really only maybe 1, 2, or 3 people of your potential ownership group responsible for everything. It can seem like a lot of hurdles, but it doesn't mean that we have to burn ourselves out and run ourselves into the ground. We still need to take care of the self first, which I think that's great advice, Miriam. And it's funny, I think you said at the beginning, introducing what you do, you took a non-linear path, but looking back on it now, and maybe while you were doing it as well, would you say, it seemed very calculated, but, some advice for people out there as well is, there is, even if you're maybe unsatisfied or felt like there's all there is to learn, that each step that you take isn't just for naught. you can take those things and learn from every experience. Hopefully I, taught you a thing or two, but probably not. But, would you say that's accurate, is just trying to see the value in the things you are doing, knowing that you do have, an end goal in sight?
Yeah, I think so. I'm having like a flashback to my first ever manager, Justin, at Undertone, and he used to make fun of me for being like I can't remember what nickname he gave me, but that I would like take every opportunity, like just take like anything that came my way, be like, yep, I can do that. Yep, I can do that. And was a very eager beaver. And I think it was partly like just me, my personality, like I like to take things on. But after a certain point, I did sort of realize that there was a calculation on my part where I always knew that my dream was to be an entrepreneur. Like that was always something I knew at some point in my life I wanted to do. And I was like, okay, like, so what do I need to get good at to be able to be effective at that later? And I think both Undertone and Churn offered me a lot of opportunities to get good at things that I knew I could translate later. So I think once that light bulb kind of clicked while I was at Undertone, it was easy for me to understand like the value of what I was doing. I still hit that wall, like Susie was saying, I still hit the wall of, okay, I don't think I can gain more here now. But everything before that, definitely there was like some thinking and planning and calculation before that.
Gotcha. Yeah. And Susu, you mentioned this before, where you met up with your now co-founder and kind of talking to Miriam about how we don't want to feel like all the weight is on ourselves and potentially leaning on friends, family members, coworkers, or other owners. Who are the people that you work with? Maybe who are some of the other folks on your team? And I'd love for you to speak a little bit about the value in the people that you surround yourself with to fulfill this purpose and to execute these passions that you have.
Yeah, we at Givesley, we have a great small team, but I think we're really strong at our core, and that's why we've been able to accomplish so much. And I think it's aligning a few things. We all have different strengths, but we're all hardworking. We all have each other's back. We're figuring this out together. So I think being able to rely on each other and trust each other is really big. But mainly we're also, tied to our mission. We all feel like we have a purpose, driven career right now. And, our mission of really tapping into resources that exist in business. We've all sort of been on the other side. I used to manage the budgets that we're, talking about now. And I know that these resources are there to entertain clients, to get new leads. And so I think everything we do is so rooted in social impact. And especially now there is such a need. And I think we're just all so committed to that goal. And so that's why we show up every day. We're here to work hard together, but we are such a strong team that that is all, no one's faking it here, and I think that's the big thing. We all really do have this combined passion and purpose, and I think that's why we have seen such success so far. Yeah,
I'd love to expand on that a little bit, because I think you hit the nail on the head, and the passions and the purpose of everybody around you. I'd like to take a moment to just either acknowledge if this is the case for either of you, or maybe not, but having that unified purpose, right? That higher level sort of why you guys do what you do. It sounds like everybody is unified on that, right? Going into it, you have this idea that you want to create this purpose that you're driven towards, but we know that working with other people, maybe it's our coworkers or maybe it's our founders, if it's one of you, what happens when those passions don't align? Do you, and have you found a way to work with your co-founders in a way that optimizes all of your strengths and allows you not only to serve that purpose, but to use the passions that you have individually and uniquely in a way that best sets you guys up for success? And Susu, why don't you start a little bit, since you hinted on some of that? What's it like trying to align the passions underneath the purpose?
Yeah, well, I think definitely being in sort of a startup where we're really building everything, we're relying on everyone's, skill set. While there's, things we have to tackle in the short term as a small team, like playing into each other's passions and letting each other sort of soar where it is something, we want to own, or an idea that you bring up, like I said, we're building this together. And I think if the purpose is there, everyone will let each other's passions come in and thrive. And we're building that culture. So I think just especially at the start, sort of establishing those, values that you as a company hold, and just staying authentic to that, I think is what's really key for sort of allowing everybody to shine, together, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Miriam, what about you? Is there ever a time where you feel like either the purpose is changing or the passions don't necessarily align? And what's it like trying to really, for the first time, create a team that can work like a solid engine and all align towards that greater goal?
Yeah. So a couple of things pop to mind when you ask that. So I think first, the problem we're trying to solve is so big, right? And that's, I think, part of our challenge is like the idea of like bringing more young people into social impact so that it's a more diverse workforce and that people are being paid better so they can stay in it, is like a really big industry-wide crisis that we can't ourselves solve. So I think actually part of our challenge has always been that we all have different visions of sort of how we're going to get there. And we sort of saw that at the very beginning of this process. And rather than like bicker about it or say like, well, we're fundamentally never going to agree, so let's walk away, we embraced the fact that we all had really different worldviews on it. And we're like, okay, how do we bring together all of our different perspectives to create something that we all feel really bought in on? So I think that was like really early on, establishing communication and establishing like honest kind of feedback and kind of open dialogue about this stuff was really, really crucial, especially given the complexity of what we were trying to solve for. And then I think now in our day-to-day management, since I feel like a lot of that has really leveled off, although it rears its head every now and then as we continue to scale and expand, like these existential things come up. But I think we have really little ego among the three of us, like when it comes to who gets visibility and who gets like whatever. And I think partly it's personality, like our personalities really fit well together in terms of the kind of roles we like to take on in an entrepreneurship and startup space. And we also have really different skill sets, and we appreciate that. Like, it's really nice to know that I don't like to build like long workshops, but my partner does. My partner hates doing cold outreach. I'm very comfortable with it. And so for us, it's a really easy, like, I know you're doing your part and I'm doing my part, and we're getting it done, and we're communicating all the time. And we tell each other when to take breaks. We tell each other when to relax. Like, it was my birthday yesterday, and my friends and my co-founders were like, take a half day. And like, they insisted I not work yesterday. So I think I have built a lot of trust, and we've built a lot of communication. And so that's really what's helped drive where we're at now and the dynamic we're at now. Good.
Yes, I hope you got to enjoy your birthday. But that is actually a really interesting point that I kind of want to pivot off of, because what we're all talking about right now is with the things that we are creating, right? You started something of your own, but bringing this into the context, potentially some of those poll people, some of the people who voted around not necessarily finding that they're fulfilling their purpose at work. We're talking a lot about finding your skill sets, working with people, communications, and it sounds like there are ways to incorporate your passions and create a purpose around a unified goal in the workplace. I just would love to point to those folks on the line to see, recommendations or advice that you would have for bringing your purpose to the workplace that you're currently in, for those who don't seem to find it or haven't found it. Susu, do you have any advice or maybe ways in which in your old role still try to pursue your purpose in a job that you didn't really feel maybe had one? And maybe that could have been outside of the office too, but just some tips there.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, I can't speak to where everybody else works, but I think if you can learn to speak up and share and bring in to a company things that you are, that is your purpose, I think you will be well received. No one, if, like in a past role, just an example, if it's bringing in, a nonprofit that you love and want to, do a fundraising campaign for, or if it's, a race, or if there's anything that you have, whether it's outside of work or want to bring into work, I don't think anyone within your company, or I hope they wouldn't, shoot you down for wanting to sort of integrate that. And I hope you're at a place where they lift you up and give you that space. Like I think for you, Ben, that you presented and Undertone sort of helped you out with that. But I think the ownership does need to be on you to pull that in. And I think sometimes people do try and separate business and, purpose and passion outside. But the more you try and weave it in, I think this does go back to Givesley and our mission. Like there are resources in business, and as companies are pivoting to try and navigate that, they're going to look to their employees as well. So as an employee, if you can raise your voice and be a guiding light and say, these are my values as someone working for your company, this is how I want you to help me, or I'd love to bring this initiative. I'm sure you could, get something across the line if you definitely speak up and take ownership.
I think that's a great point, and I didn't want to spend too much time talking about my own experience, but I think, Susu, you hit on it for me personally. And I always like to say and get into the conversation of what gets you out of bed in the morning. And if you're in a job that maybe the work itself doesn't necessarily get you out of bed, and even for us too, I'm sure there are days, and I can take ownership of this, where I'm not always excited, and in those TV commercials, you're just ready to go and up and at 'em. It takes a couple cups of coffee first. But if you don't have that, like I, started to feel, I had a meeting, and I'm grateful to be at a company like Undertone, but there are so many great companies out there who I know will accept that. Having a conversation and talking about how you can blend those passions and what your purpose is in the role to add value. Because at the end of the day, whether it is these social or charitable organizations that we're founding, or maybe it's just you feel like your purpose is to motivate people and to inspire people with whatever they do, which is more my focus, asking to get that chance to show how it's going to provide a positive impact, not only in your own work, because you'll feel more excited to get out of bed in the morning, but for those around you, I think is so important to everybody for them to take away is, like Susu did, like Miriam did, don't be afraid to take those risks. You're only putting out, and you're only anticipating the bad of what's going to happen after you take that risk. And it's a hard little line to cross, but once you do, you at least tell yourself, your future self, well, I asked the question, I had that conversation, and you're better because of it. And Miriam, what about you? I'd ask you sort of the similar question to Susu, and just managing all of those things, and how potentially in your current role, if you're not doing or starting your own company, how you can bring your purpose to your job and your career.
Yeah, so I think it sounds really fluffy, but I think it starts with like a little bit of reflection on like what brings you joy day to day. So like something that I'm just thinking about as this conversation's happening is I got a lot of fulfillment from my first 2 jobs because I really loved the people that I worked with. Like I really cared about my Undertone colleagues and coworkers, and like wanted to see them succeed and wanted to support them. And like, spoiler, I was not like deeply passionate about digital advertising, but I was really deeply passionate about the people I sat next to every day and seeing them grow and like running this business. So for me, that was like where a lot of my purpose came from for so long. So like, as I think about it, I think that was less tangible, and it wasn't my work product, but it was a thing that made me really happy. So that brought me purpose. And I think another thing is, like our careers are, long spanning things. And even if you're not in a position to leave your role right now, I think there's a lot of stuff that you can do right now to think about where you want to be next. So like what I coach a lot of people on is like, okay, sit down and think about what brings you joy, what are you good at, and like from a very high level. So if you're really good with people, if you're really good with pitching, if you're really good at creative, if you're good with words, like what are the things you're good at? And there's a lot of resources and research out there to figure out like, okay, so what organizations could I work for one day? What kind of role could I have one day that my skills right now translate to? And in the way that I was sort of calculating like, okay, one day I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be really good at, for example, running my own websites. When I was doing that for Undertone, like, even though it was, a website on content that didn't like, make my heart glow, I was like really excited that I was getting better at website design and website management. And that made me really excited because I knew it was going to go towards something later on that I could really care about. So I think that's another thing, is that we have the ability to kind of do some planning ahead. And when you start working on projects that you know will serve you in a longer term sense, suddenly it kind of drives you in a whole new way. So that's like another tangible thing that I would encourage people who are in a position to think that way to start kind of implementing themselves.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Miriam. And we all kind of touched on this a little bit, and I mentioned it in my last little statement there, but I would love to talk about, because there's almost this elephant in the room when you're talking to other people, or you're talking to someone who maybe has started their own business, and you know, feeling like, wow, I get the question of like, what's it like to wake up every day and be doing all the things that you're passionate about and that you find purpose in? That must be amazing. But I do want to touch on the fact that for at least myself, there are hurdles, there are hardships, there are days where we may feel like we question potentially what we are doing. And I wanted to address that a little bit about how you stay motivated, and talking about the reality of not every day in your dream job is going to be the best day in the world. And Susu, do you have experience in that? And how do you stay motivated in your role, and to remind yourself that not every day has to be the best day just because you feel like you're matching your career and your purpose and your passion?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question, because I think while, Miriam and I are living, out our dreams, I think, it's not easy, it's not like it's not a walk in the park, it's hard work. And, I would say, one thing for me was, from going from, a big corporate company with lots of team members and departments and, a ton of resources, to really building something from scratch. That hasn't been the easiest, but like to stay motivated, it's honestly, and I think Miriam has said this before, it's the mini wins that keep you going. It's the progress. It's the people. There are so many things that I think we can, latch onto to keep that motivation, because we are all so aligned, and like I said, it's authentic. And so while some days it's figuring out how to, make a video when I've never used iMovie, because, that has to get done. There's certain things, but I would say, checking in on those mini wins, on that progress, and seeing something come to life will always keep me motivated. And, if it's one event where you see kids smile, even if it's through Zoom these days, like it's just all, reassuring that this hard work is, making an impact. And, even working with all our partners and helping them, use their resources for good. It's just, it's honestly a joy every day. So while there are things that you run up against, I think we all have like the will to power through, because we see what's on the other side of those roadblocks, and I mean, very easy thing, not an easy thing, but I think we've all been affected. This pandemic, we're on Zoom right now, we're not in person. I think this has thrown us all huge, roadblocks, and has made navigating, our ventures a little bit different. We had plans for this year. I'm sure Miriam did too. And that sort of, you just have to, keep going. It's the same thing with other roadblocks. And I think even, I'm sure, it's really now more than ever, our services are needed. And I think, we launched a platform 2 weeks after New York went on lockdown. And I think
wow.
We all just took it and said, okay, like we're in this. And it has honestly, we've seen just how much of a need really Givesley has been for our industry. And so I think things like that keep us motivated. We can't sit down and say, well, there's a pandemic, so, no one's going to sign up for, like, I think if anything, it has kept us moving, because communities need us right now. And so,
Yeah, it's the last thing you said there too, I think was the perfect summary, because because almost in a way that you guys are the only ones responsible, since you don't necessarily work for a large organization or have the resources, like you said, that you might have had in the past, in some ways, we might, and I feel we might be doing more things that we don't like or aren't passionate about just because there is potentially no one else to do them. But at the same time, you know, when our jobs, and for people on the line might feel the same way that you took that perspective, as there's so much to do that maybe I don't want to, or we have to adapt, is you never said the word problem, or these are problems that we have to solve. They're more, it seems like your perspective is that there are opportunities for growth. And I know that's very cliche, but I think that, you know, knowing that you guys feel the same way, and having felt that, I'm sure, in other roles, and people on the call feeling that there's a lot of problems to solve, really framing that a little bit differently can really help you not only learn for what's next, but also produce the best result and keep you motivated to solve the problems. So, and Miriam, I'd love for you to mention, potentially just while we're on the subject, how this pandemic has potentially changed the way that you operate, or needed to change the purpose or the structures behind Second Day.
Yeah, I mean, so logistically, we work with college students, right? And college campuses are completely disrupted, shut down, total messes. Like even now, universities are making game time decisions of what to do with their students. So I think that's been like a whole thing we've had to deal with. But for us, we saw that was happening, and we said, you know, let's just go for it. Let's just do this remote. Let's open up this program to anybody who wants to participate wherever they are in the country. And that has been like a huge win for us, actually. I think being willing to look at something that could really disrupt everything you've built and everything you'd envisioned before that point, and say, nope, we're going to run with it, because we care more about the larger mission of what we're trying to solve than like what feels sometimes just like the minutia of how we get it done, right? So like whether we do our workshops in person or remote, like that's like a discussion we can have, but as long as it's getting us to where we need to go and get more people into social impact, that's all that really matters. So I think when you're able to look at a hurdle like that and say what really matters here, and not being too stubborn about what you had previously hoped to do, and being willing to adapt, is a really big piece of it. So that's been really disruptive. But then I think it's also opened a lot of opportunity. I think COVID, the protests going on around the country, like people are really thinking a lot about their role in society and how they can help and how they can participate. So I think we got, our timing is really advantageous for our message, I will say. So people are really resonating with what we're talking about. So I think once we kind of got over the shock of everything being different, we were able to see the opportunity and really just like run at it full force. And it's been working for us, I will say. So knock wood.
Yeah. I agree. And I actually think what you said is very important for everybody on this call, because I think that you're right. Now more than ever, we do, with the pandemic and everything else, there is more of a culture now to look deep into ourselves for so many reasons and find what our true purpose is. And we might know what we're good at and what we like doing, but the reasons behind them now may have totally changed, or maybe how we're going to get there has had to change because of it. But again, these are opportunities for us to learn about those things and deepen our purpose behind these moments. So I think that's extremely valuable for everybody to hear. And you know, Susu, you mentioned this a little bit, and I would love to talk about. There are so many things that we need to do, and we're talking about how much work goes and how many potential hurdles there are or opportunities to conquer. But what other resources, in addition to the people, have you found yourselves leaning on? Are there books that you have found inspiration from to potentially find your purpose or be better at executing your passions? Books, anything that we could tangibly take away that could help us get motivated or search for that meaning? And Susu, why don't you start if you have a few?
Yeah, so there's definitely a couple. One that I do encourage, people to check out is this online, social impact network called Be Social Change. We have partnered with them on a few initiatives, and they put on, awesome content. They host networking sessions. So if you just want to meet, like-minded individuals, or explore what your purpose might be, I think, you should definitely check that out. For anyone who might be looking for inspiration, if it's starting something on your own, or just any guidance, last year I got this book called Dear Female Founder. And it's letters that female founders who I think have grown their companies to billion-dollar companies have written these letters. And it's almost like each one is sort of a key takeaway that you should adopt into your day, or something you should do. And so the one thing that I always do, this one founder said, eat your frog every day, which is like one big task. If there was one thing you could do every day, get it done, and then the rest of your day will feel a lot lighter. And I think not only for starting your own company, but trying to find your purpose, it probably seems really overwhelming to just say, well, let me find my purpose today. So I think it's, if you can sort of establish one thing you're going to do every day to get there, I think that will make that journey seem a little less scary. But so wake up and eat your frog every day and read that book.
That's awesome. And I personally feel like I need to eat my frog every day. There are always seemingly a million things and 100 hurdles that you're looking ahead to jump over, and just getting over one adds another 10 after that. But focusing on those wins and eating the biggest hurdle of the day is awesome. Miriam, anything from you? Any helpful resources or podcasts you listen to that people can check out?
Yeah, so I would recommend first the book that we actually make all of our students read, because nothing will motivate you to think about social change like this book does, and really rethink the kind of power structures of our society. It's called Winners Take All by Anand Giridharadas, and I know Vanessa is going to send out the title afterwards, but we make all of our students read it, and their minds are always blown. It's always a really fun discussion after the fact. So that's just, it's an easy read, and it'll really get you thinking. So highly recommend that. And then from like an entrepreneurship perspective, like I, personally for me, when I started Second Day, like a lot of people, I think turned their nose up a little bit at the idea that it was going to be a nonprofit. And to a lot of people, they felt like it wasn't a real business. It wasn't a real enterprise. And I really wanted to not internalize that. So I get a lot of inspiration from listening to How I Built This by Guy Raz. And like, I really like that he interviews like the person who started Bumble, or who started Allbirds, or these like major brands that we all know and consider really successful companies, and listening to them talk about their journey and how much of it I can kind of relate to, and I can apply their advice and their experience to my own journey, makes me feel really good about the work that I do, and really teaches me a lot of ways that I can similarly improve every day, like the book that Susu mentioned. So I think I would recommend that just for someone who's really interested in entrepreneurship and hearing people build things from the ground up. It's just an interesting kind of thing to build into your week. So that's the other one I would recommend.
Yeah, that's great. That actually sparks another question from me that I personally feel sometimes, and I think even in our own jobs, or for those listening, we might feel or face. But that last resource that you shared, looking at other people and hearing their story and learning potentially their roots and how they came to be. And some of them maybe started from nothing. Some of them maybe had, a great opportunity that they took advantage of. But how do you guys navigate the real seemingly culture now of needing to get out there and doing your own thing and starting your own business? I feel the pressure a lot. I don't know if it's necessarily as big of a problem as our entrepreneurial and our entrepreneur friends maybe make it feel, just because we're surrounded by a lot of those people. But like Susu, how do you find that weight of maybe expectation or other competitors to yours, or other companies who popped up, and getting caught up in the pressure around you, and looking at other companies that you might see as more successful than your own?
That's a good question. I think it goes back to just not being, we're building something. And so I think we're so, I don't want to say we're not focused on competitors, because obviously you look into what other companies are doing, but we don't get distracted, I think, by what other companies are doing. Also, I would say that a lot of times, you know, in the space of social impact, I think most of the time we can also just look at partnerships. And so I don't think it's by getting distracted or put down that we're not in a certain place. I think we're just focused on our growth and on our impact. And so if we can look to other companies to partner, to learn from, to grow from, I'd say that's really, that's where our head's at. I don't think in social impact, you know, to be a competitor, if we're all doing good, I think trying to think of it under the lens of how can we all be, you know, partners, making a better world, rather than, oh, this one's doing this, well, we're not doing that. You know, it's definitely, I would say, I feel like we've all been pretty focused on our mission and sticking to that while looking to other companies for how we can just help better, you know, what they're doing, or vice versa.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, even from a interpersonal relationship too. If you find that you feel that weight or pressure, and look to other coworkers of your own or people who are in other jobs and look how happy they are, all the things that they're doing. And I love this quote from a book, 12 Rules for Life, but a chapter about compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And that's a really great way of just, you know, constant improvement and seeing others around you as inspiration and partnerships and learning from the people who you might see as more successful than your own, but you can learn from them. And just like Miriam did, right? Every conversation that you have is potentially an opportunity to learn, and you can take that with you. So Miriam, anything from you too in that same regard? We do have a couple questions that I also want to make sure that we get to as well at the end.
I think the only other thing that I would speak to on this, because I agree with everything Susu said, is just everyone's on a really different path and has like a different set of circumstances that they're working with. And Susu and I guess I should speak for you, but I feel like I had the privilege to be able to take that time off, that I was able to take this risk, that I was able to kind of go at it at my pace. And not everyone has that. And I think it's just really, really important to acknowledge that. And that's also why the comparison game is really dangerous. So I don't know, for me, I think that keeping your head down, focusing, like you said, on your own personal growth, and understanding that everybody is working with a different set of circumstances and is doing the best that they can, and that includes each of us, is a really important thing to consider when we're using any kind of measuring stick, which I try and avoid doing at all costs unless I really, really have to.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I am going to ask a couple questions from the viewers. We had one that did come in prior to the call through our splash page. And the question is, how do you calculate risk when finding your purpose? I believe we touched on this a little bit earlier in this conversation, but maybe Miriam, you can expand a little bit more on potentially the weight of pursuing that purpose. And like you kind of just mentioned, maybe not having the opportunity to quit the role that you're in to pursue those things. How do you manage all of that? And how did you when you went through it?
I think that it kind of ties back to my advice earlier, where no one's saying that you need to quit your job tomorrow. Like that might not be the right choice for a lot of people. I think it's carving out time for yourself to think about your purpose and reflect and do research. Like, I think there's like really, I think people assume you wake up one day and you're just like, I know what I want to do with my life today. And like, you have this like awakening. For me, like I became increasingly passionate about the work that I do because I researched it a lot. I researched it. I talked to a lot of people who experienced it. I talked to employers. I talked to students. And the more that I really put aside time to foster that interest, the more it became my purpose. I think it's important to carve that time out. And then again, like create a plan for yourself. Like think about the things that are in your control, and start and taking small steps every day to work towards it. Whether, like Susu said, it's incorporating something in your existing job, whether it's preparing your portfolio, preparing your resume, whether it's starting to do virtual coffee chats with people who are in fields that you're interested in. Like you can do this really with intention, and in a way that kind of mitigates risks that you might be encountering. So that would be like just tactical advice I would have for someone who's thinking about it.
That's great. Yeah, you know, I've been having to do, because our studio was actually closed down for like almost 4 months. where we've been open up since the beginning of July, but you said virtual coffee chats. We've been doing virtual workouts, but that's an interesting time, having virtual coffee chats to network, brewing your coffee at the same time, you know, having matching mugs. That's pretty good. But yeah, I mean, even from a personal perspective too, I think, Mary, you touched on this a little bit, but also understanding that those opportunities can be found in your current role, even if you feel like that's not an option or you feel unfulfilled. I think the beauty of, and why I'm so happy to be working for Undertone, is they allow that. And we mentioned this before, but asking even when I didn't necessarily know the answer, and then ultimately being amazingly surprised and grateful that they are a company that wants to support really their employees' purpose and pursue their passions in the way that's best going to set Undertone up for success, and you and your career and your advancements as well. I think that's really, really solid and sound advice to make sure that you explore all your current opportunities when calculating risks, just so that you know that you've checked that box before potentially quitting and then realizing that your company, just like Undertone, was going to allow you to pursue that if you potentially had just asked. So, and I know, Susu, you touched on that before as well. So I think that's super important. And the next question, actually, Susu, I wanted to direct at you first is, let's see, I'm reading it here. Many organizations invest in social impact efforts to strengthen relationships with employees to increase morale and reduce churn. Do you believe social impact can be an effective means to deepen customer relationships and or attract new customers? I think you mentioned it before, and the reason why I point to you first is this is a time where all of this is going on, and Gisley has an awesome opportunity to help bring that to people. But share your perspective on that question, and we can expand on it as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question. And it's actually kind of where we got started as a company. We launched an event series called Gisley 5 Pledge, which encourages and actually challenges companies to take 5% of those entertainment budgets. So the money that you traditionally, would use on a happy hour, another fancy dinner. And we just said, if you took 5% of that budget and shifted it over to events that partner with nonprofits and gave back, still bring those clients in the same way, but you will do it in a way that you're forming deeper relationships. Because I think as an industry, we've been to a ton of happy hours. We've had jeans and sunglasses thrown at us, and it's sort of like, what is going to stick out in your client's mind when it's sort of hard to stand out in that sense. And bonding over an experience that gives back is really, where we got started, and have seen, over 20 plus companies take that pledge because they've seen the value out of doing that, that as well. And Undertone, you guys are one of them that has, joined the pledge and has participated at these events. And I mean, especially now, how can you, interact with your clients in a virtual setting? And, I think our platform helps with that as well. We're hearing feedback that people are having these virtual meetings and not walking in the door, but logging on the Zoom, already feeling like they're on a different level, because as the person who volunteered their time, that the person you're meeting with already is valuing your time because, they've put a donation towards a nonprofit you support. And as the person walking in, something that they care about, something that's, a cause near and dear to their heart. So, we can get past the whole, it's sunny outside and where are you quarantining? And you can actually have a conversation about real things and real, issues that are going on in the world. And I think it's humanizing business. So, just to kind of, summarize that, I definitely think if you haven't tried interacting with partners in a way that is rooted in impact, definitely reach out to Gisley or, try it. And I would say you'll be so surprised, or not surprised, at those relationships you build when it's rooted in something that's not just another happy hour.
Yeah, and similarly, it's for, especially for Undertone as well. Like it doesn't become just a badge that you wear that you have social impact or that you invest money. It becomes a part of what you do. And if your organization is purposeful and rooted in purpose, truly from how it's organized and the things that the business does, the entity does, it carries into the employees. into you, yourself, and your partners, clients, and customers. Miriam, do you have anything to add?
I do. Yeah, I really wanted to say that I think what is really good about Givesly is that it speaks to authenticity. I think what I've seen a lot is that if corporations, when they want to have social impact, it can ring really hollow. And I will say, especially working with Gen Z now, as closely as I do, they have a really strong BS meter. And like, if you really do want to engage with customers and clients, as you progress, authenticity and like really actually living that social impact and putting your money where your mouth is and like walking the talk is going to be super important. So yeah, I just really want to echo that. Like, it's not about the badge. I think now more than ever, people are looking really closely to see like, okay, you say you're committed to social impact, show us that you're really doing something. So if you're going to do it like with the full authentic, like earnest energy that you really want to be there.
Awesome. Awesome. I mean, I think that's a perfect ending point for this conversation. I know that we're right at about time as well. I did want to do two things. I wanted to try to sum up everything that we talked about today. And I also wanted to potentially give everybody an opportunity to learn how we can get in contact with you, Susu, and Miriam, maybe just sharing your Instagrams for your nonprofits or for Givesly. But to sum things up, and please chime in if you feel like I missed something, it really seems like the most important things first and foremost is to build a community that supports you, that's driven with the same purpose as you are, that may have different passions. I think something else that's really important that we talked about is to really try to focus on your wins, both with what you're doing now, if it's a job that you might be unsatisfied with, still finding the wins and seeing the opportunities and not the problems. And take risks, because you never know what's going to happen. And I feel personally, more than often than not, the downsides are far less than what the actual true upside of those risks are. I think we can all say from personal experience that that's the case. And I think the most important thing is that we should all eat a frog. And that's a good way to say every day, just eat your frog, get the biggest task that you can done. Susu, I love that. That's so great. But if I missed anything, please let me know. But Miriam, how can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would just say go to secondday.org to learn more about what we do. If you want to donate, even better. But if you're just curious on sort of how we operate and what we're doing, you can also email me directly at Miriam@secondday.org, and I'm happy to share more about our work.
Awesome. Susu, how about you?
Yeah, so encourage everybody to go to givesly.com. You can actually sign up and create a profile and attach Second Day as a nonprofit to support with meetings you volunteer. Volunteering is free, so definitely check it out. But if you do want to get in touch, my email is susu@givesly.com as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for this conversation. It's been great. Hopefully those joining also saw some value in there. I do hope that you reach out to us. Our Instagram for Undertone is @accessundertone. Feel free to shoot us a DM or an email at tellmemore@undertone.com. Thank you guys so much for joining, and I can't wait to connect with you offline and can't wait to see everybody else again on the next Undertone Anywhere webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
you.
Guys.